My name is Anya. For 18 years, my life was a symphony of small, beautiful noises. The frantic percussion of little feet running down the hallway in the morning, the gentle hum of the dishwasher after a family dinner, the soft, rhythmic scratch of my pencil on a sketch pad, a sound I thought was the prelude to a future I'd get to later. My husband, David, was the conductor of our orchestra, and I trusted him completely. He sold me a dream wrapped in the warm, golden light of family, and I bought it with my whole future. I didn't know that the same man who loved the chaos of our children's laughter would one day dismiss the woman who created that home as a liability. Before we continue, kindly take a minute to like and subscribe to this channel, and feel free to tell us where you are watching from. Our home was a riot of color and life. The walls of our cozy bungalow were not beige. They were sunshine yellow in the kitchen, robin's egg blue in the living room, colors I'd painstakingly chosen and painted myself. The sofa was a deep, forgiving navy, constantly strewn with a rainbow of throw pillows, and more often than not, a child or a sleeping cat. The air always smelled of something: simmering pasta sauce, the waxy scent of crayons, the clean linen fragrance of laundry fresh from the dryer. I was a graphic designer. I loved the weight of a good pen in my hand, the crispness of a new pad of tracing paper, the satisfying click of pulling a perfect Pantone chip from a swatch book. My home office was a sun-drenched nook off the living room, my desk a beautiful, old oak thing littered with cups holding paintbrushes and pencils. After our second child, Mia, was born, the chaos tipped from joyful to overwhelming. We were a ballet of dropped sippy cups, missed deadlines, and forgotten permission slips. David approached it like he approached everything, with a spreadsheet. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, he led me to the kitchen table. He had printed out charts and graphs. The numbers, in stark black and white, were undeniable. "Anya, look," he said, his voice gentle, his finger tracing a column. "Your entire salary, every single penny, is going to the daycare for Leo and Mia. And then some. We're actually losing money when you factor in your commute, your work clothes, the takeout we order because you're too tired to cook." I stared at the numbers. They felt cold and alien against the warm reality of my life. "But it's my career, David. It's not just about the money, it's who I am." He took my hands, his thumbs stroking my palms. "I know, my love. I know. And you're brilliant. But think of this not as an ending, but an investment." His eyes were so earnest, so full of love. "This is a short-term sacrifice. A few years, just until they're both in school. I want them to have you, your patience, your creativity, your love. I can provide the financial stability. You provide the heart." He painted a picture so beautiful it brought tears to my eyes. Leisurely mornings, making pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Afternoons in the park instead of in a cubicle. Reading stories instead of writing emails. "And when they're older," he promised, his voice a low, thrilling whisper, "I will support you in anything you want to do. We'll hire a business coach. You can start your own studio. I'll be your first and biggest investor. This is just phase 1. I was seduced by the vision. I resigned. My boss, a fierce woman named Evelyn who had championed me, was devastated. "Anya, you have real talent. Don't let it go dormant," she'd pleaded. But I was too deep in the dream. For a time, the dream was real. The house was filled with the smell of baking cookies and finger paint. The blue sofa became a fortress of blankets and pillows. David would come home to a clean house, a happy wife, and laughing children. He'd sweep me into a hug, smelling of crisp air and cologne, and whisper, "This is perfect. You are perfect. This is exactly how it should be." I filled sketchbooks with drawings of the kids. Leo's serious concentration as he built block towers. Mia's gummy, milk-drunk smile. I designed elaborate birthday party invitations and painstaking Halloween costumes. My world had shrunk, but it felt deep and rich. But slowly, the edges began to fray. Conversations with David shifted from we to you and I. You need to manage the kids' schedule better. I had a brutal day at the office. The market is killing me. My stories about the funny thing Mia said were met with distracted nods. His stories about work deals and clients became a foreign language I no longer spoke. When the kids started middle school, I tentatively broached the subject of my future. Maybe I could take that advanced digital design course online, just to brush up my skills? David frowned, not looking up from his tablet. Honey, now? The tuition is astronomical, and we're saving for the kids' college funds. That's the priority. Your time will come. The promise of Phase 2 began to feel like a forgotten, empty box in the attic. The kids left for college within a year of each other. The silence in the house was deafening. The yellow kitchen felt too bright, the blue sofa too large. David worked later and traveled more for conferences. The discovery was an accident. He'd left his iPad on the kitchen counter, charging. A notification popped up. Chloe, confirmed, room 412. Can't wait to see you. This week can't go fast enough. My blood ran cold. Chloe. His new junior associate. The one he'd mentioned was so sharp, so ambitious. My hands, which had once been so steady with a scalpel and a pen, trembled as I tapped the screen. The password was still our anniversary. The arrogance of it stung. I didn't have to scroll far. The messages were a brutal education. It wasn't the sex that destroyed me. It was the contempt. Chloe, doesn't your wife wonder where you are? David, she's too busy watching her reality shows and reorganizing the pantry. She's completely checked out. A liability. Liability. The word echoed in the silent, tidy kitchen. I looked around at the home I had built, the pantry I had organized so everything was easy to find for him, and felt the walls close in. Chloe. I could never just not work. I'd go insane. David. I know, that's what I love about you. You have a mind, a drive. You're a real partner. Anya, she's just comfortable, like a favorite old armchair. You stop noticing it's there. I actually stumbled back, my hip hitting the counter. A favorite old armchair. I saw the actual armchair in the living room, its floral fabric faded from years of sunlight and use. I had nursed both our children in that chair. I had held David's hand in it when his father died. It was the most loved piece of furniture in the house, and he had reduced me to it. Something comfortable, invisible, and utterly disposable. The nausea was immediate and violent. I barely made it to the sink. I stood there, gasping, tears of sheer, unadulterated rage and humiliation streaming down my face. He had taken my talent, my ambition, my years of unpaid labor, the school runs, the sick days, the birthday parties, the emotional load of an entire family, and he had itemized it on a balance sheet of his own ego. My sacrifice was my greatest weakness in his eyes. The naive, trusting woman he described would have collapsed. She would have wept and confronted him. But that woman was gone, erased by the cold, clarifying fire of his words. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I wiped my face with the dishcloth that smelled of lemon. Then, with a steadiness that surprised me, I took my phone and photographed every single message. I emailed them to a secret account. I erased my tracks. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at the woman there. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but in their depths was a glint of something that had been dormant for 18 years. Not just anger, ambition. He thought I was a liability, an old armchair. He was about to learn that armchairs can be reupholstered, and liabilities can come with a devastatingly high interest rate. He wanted a working woman, a real partner. He was about to get one, and her first project would be the hostile takeover of everything he held dear. The silence in the house after the discovery was different. It was no longer an empty silence. It was a charged one. humming with a new, terrible energy. I moved through the familiar rooms, the sunshine yellow kitchen, the robin's egg blue living room, as if I were a ghost surveying the life I'd once lived. Every object told a story of my sacrifice. The small, chipped vase Leo made in 3rd grade, the faint stain on the rug from where Mia had spilled grape juice, the well-worn path on the hardwood floor from the kitchen sink to the stove. This wasn't just a house. It was the museum of my abandoned self. David came home that night, pretending nothing was wrong. He hung his tailored wool coat in the closet, the one I'd organized by season and color. "Smells good in here," he said, his voice a carefully calibrated performance of normalcy. He'd picked up takeout from the fancy Thai place we used to go to for celebrations. "Pad Thai," he announced, setting the bags on the counter. "Your favorite." It was his favorite. I preferred the paning curry. He'd forgotten. The detail was a tiny, insignificant knife twist. "Thanks," I said, my voice neutral. I didn't look at him. I focused on setting the table, placing the cutlery with a precision I usually reserved for holiday dinners. He chattered about his day, about the market, about a difficult client. The words were just noise. All I could hear was his voice in those texts. Liability. Old armchair. We ate in near silence. The food tasted like ash. "Everything okay, Anya?" he asked, finally sensing the glacial atmosphere. "You're quiet." "Just tired," I lied, meeting his eyes for the first time. I saw a flicker of unease in his, a predator sensing a shift in the wind, but not yet seeing the trap. He nodded, relieved, and launched into a story about Chloe's clever handling of the difficult client. I let him talk. I studied him, the confident set of his shoulders, the easy smile. It was all a performance for an audience of one, and the audience had just walked out. The next morning, I began. David had always handled the big finances, a task he'd taken over with the air of a benevolent dictator when I quit my job. "Don't you worry your pretty head about it, Anya," he'd say. "I've got this." Now I needed to see what this was. I waited until he left for work. Then I went into his study. It was a room of dark wood and leather, smelling of his cologne and expensive printer paper. His desk was obsessively neat. I started with the filing cabinet. Mortgage statements, investment portfolios, tax returns. I took photos of everything with my phone. Then I found what I was looking for, a small locked fireproof box on the top shelf of his closet. The key was taped to the back of his golf trophy. Inside I found our wills, the deeds to the house, and a separate private bank book for an account I never knew existed. Statements going back years. Substantial monthly deposits from his business account. Withdrawals for things I'd never seen. Jewelry, luxury hotel stays, a payment to a high-end maternity boutique. Chloe. He wasn't just cheating, he was funding a parallel life. My hands shook, but not with sadness. With the pure, clean thrill of the hunt. He had hidden assets. This was no longer just about heartbreak, it was about fraud. I went into my sun-drenched nook. My beautiful oak desk was dusty. I opened the drawers, filled with dried-up markers and faded sketches. I cleared it all out. I went online and signed up for the most intensive, advanced digital design course I could find. I used the credit card he'd given me for household expenses to pay the exorbitant tuition. Household expenses. Investing in my mind was the most important household expense there was. I spent hours each day there, relearning software, my brain sparking back to life after a long dormancy. The frustration was immense, but it was a glorious frustration. It was the feeling of muscles atrophied from disuse screaming back to life. I became a master of passive observation. I noted the times of his late nights. I learned the specific cadence of his voice when he was lying to me on the phone. "I'm just leaving the office now, sweetheart." I listened for the names of his clients, his golf partners, his colleagues. I also began a campaign of subtle psychological warfare. I'd leave my new design textbooks open on the coffee table. He'd glance at them, a faint line of confusion between his brows, but say nothing. I started cooking meals he disliked: spicy curries, adventurous vegetarian dishes. I stopped stocking his favorite beer. "Where's the IPA?" he'd ask, rummaging in the fridge. "I didn't buy any," I'd say sweetly. Trying new things? I was slowly, methodically, erasing my presence as his caretaker. I was making myself unknown to him, uncomfortable. The confrontation with the iPad had been a week ago. He was getting nervous. The takeout and forced conversations had stopped. He was spending more time at the office, likely with Chloe, avoiding the strange new creature his wife had become. One evening, he finally broke. I was at my desk, headphones on, immersed in a tutorial on motion graphics. He stood in the doorway of my nook, watching me. I could feel his gaze. I slowly removed my headphones. "Anya, what is going on with you?" he asked, his voice a mixture of irritation and genuine bewilderment. "I'm learning," I said, turning back to my screen. "Learning what? For what? It's sudden." I swiveled my chair to face him. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the betrayal. I saw the faint lines of anxiety around his mouth, the confusion in his eyes. He was losing control of his narrative, and it terrified him. "You told me my time would come when the kids left for college," I said, my voice calm, devoid of accusation. It was a simple statement of fact. "They're gone, my time is now." He floundered, thrown by my calmness. "Well, yes, but we need to discuss these things. These courses cost money. We have a budget." "We do," I agreed. "And I'm reviewing it, thoroughly." I let the words hang in the air, watching his face carefully. A flicker of panic. Did he know? Did he suspect? He recovered quickly, slipping back into his role of the rational financial manager. "Anya, be reasonable. Starting a new career at your age is a risk. The market is saturated. Maybe you should consider volunteering instead. Something less stressful." At your age, volunteering. The condescension was a velvet-wrapped brick. I gave him a small, cold smile. "Don't worry your pretty head about it, David," I said, throwing his own patronizing words back at him. "I've got this." I turned and put my headphones back on, effectively dismissing him. I didn't look back, but I could feel him standing there, stunned, in the doorway of the room that had once been my retreat, but was now my command center. The siege was underway. He was inside the walls, but he was no longer in his home. He was in my territory, and he was just beginning to realize he was surrounded. The following weeks were a masterclass in quiet reclamation. The house, once a symbol of my confinement, became my headquarters. I moved through it not as a homemaker, but as a CEO auditing a company she was about to acquire. Every room held data, every receipt, every file, every offhand comment from David was a piece of intelligence. My design course was my boot camp. The initial frustration gave way to a fierce, obsessive fluency. Late into the night, the blue glow of my monitor was the only light in the house. I wasn't just learning software, I was building a new identity, pixel by pixel. David's confusion curdled into a low-grade irritation. My calm, focused presence was a constant, silent reproach. He'd try to pick fights over trivial things, a dish left in the sink, the temperature I set the thermostat to. "You're changing, Anya," he accused one night, after I'd refused to engage in an argument about grocery shopping. "I am," I agreed, not looking up from my laptop. "It's called growth." My non-combative agreeance infuriated him more than any argument could. He was used to managing my emotions. He no longer could. Armed with the documents I'd photographed, I scheduled a meeting with Evelyn, my old boss. Her design firm had only grown more prestigious. Walking into her sleek, modern office was like stepping into a forgotten version of my own life. "Anya," she said, rising from her desk, her eyes sharp and assessing. "It's been too long. I didn't waste time with small talk. I opened my portfolio, not the old one, but the new digital one I'd been building. I showed her my recent work, the course certifications. Then I told her everything: the sacrifice, the betrayal, the hidden bank account, the word liability. My voice was steady, clinical. I was presenting a business case. Evelyn listened, her expression hardening from professional interest to cold fury. "The bastard," she muttered when I finished. She leaned forward. "What do you need?" "I need a job," I said. "But not just any job. I need a project, something big that I can do remotely to start, and I need it to pay well. I need my own financial independence before I make my move." A slow, predatory smile spread across Evelyn's face. "I have just the thing, a major rebrand for a new tech startup. They're a nightmare, demanding. The budget is huge. Your cut would be significant." "Perfect," I said. I started the project that week. The first payment that landed in my new private bank account was more than my old monthly salary. I felt a surge of power so potent it made me lightheaded. This was my money, earned by my mind. No one could take it away. Next, I went to see a lawyer. Not a bulldog, but a sleek, sophisticated shark in a minimalist office named Ms. Chen. I laid out the evidence: the photos of the financial documents, the hidden bank statements, screenshots of the text messages. Ms. Chen's expression never changed. "This is excellent," she said, tapping the image of the secret bank book. "Commingling marital assets to fund an affair is a serious matter. It strengthens your position immensely. What is your desired outcome?" "I want everything," I said, my voice quiet but absolute. "The house is mine. I maintained it. I raised our children in it. I want a majority of the investments. He can keep his business. And I want this done with maximum efficiency and discretion. I don't want a messy, drawn-out fight. I want a surgical strike." Ms. Chen nodded. "Understood. We will proceed quietly. We'll file once we have everything in order. He won't see it coming." The final piece was the most dangerous: securing the physical evidence. I needed that fireproof box. I waited for a day David was scheduled for golf. His routine was sacrosanct. He wouldn't cut it short. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, I went to work. The key was still taped to the golf trophy. I opened the box and, with meticulous care, removed the hidden bank book and the most recent statements from his secret account. I took them to a print shop across town and made perfect color copies. I then returned the originals to the box exactly as I'd found them, erasing any trace of my presence. I now had a complete, undeniable record of his financial infidelity. The trap was set. The strain was starting to show on David. The money he was siphoning for his double life was suddenly needing to work harder. He became tighter with household money. "We need to cut back, Anya," he announced one evening, looking over a credit card bill. "Your spending has been erratic." He pointed to the charge for my design course. "That's an investment in our future," I said calmly, using his own favorite word against him. "It's an expense we can't afford right now," he snapped, his patience finally evaporating. "You need to be more responsible. You live in a fantasy world." I looked at him, this man who was funding a secret apartment and jewelry for his mistress, telling me to be more responsible. The hypocrisy was so vast, it was almost beautiful. I didn't argue. I just looked at him with a flat, expressionless gaze that made him flinch. "The fantasy world is the one where you think this is sustainable, David," I said softly. "You should be more careful." 2 days later, a letter arrived for him from his golf club. It was marked "Urgent, Membership Review." He tore it open at the breakfast table, his face paling. "What is it?" I asked, sipping my coffee. "It's nothing," he said quickly, stuffing the letter into his briefcase. But I'd seen enough. It was a notice of a complaint filed about his conduct, a little anonymous tip I'd sent about inappropriate behavior with a guest at the club. It was a small thing, a pinprick, but it rattled him. His perfect, controlled world was developing cracks. That night, I heard him on the phone in his study, his voice low and tense. I don't know how she found out. No, of course I didn't tell her. Just keep your head down, Chloe. This will blow over. I stood in the dark hallway, a ghost in my own home, listening to the panic in his voice. He was scared. He was starting to feel the ground shift beneath his feet. He had thought I was a liability, a passive object in the story of his life. He was beginning to understand that I was the author. And I was just finishing the chapter where he was the hero. The next one was mine. The air in the house grew thinner, charged with the silent, invisible current of my preparation. David felt it. He became a ghost in his own home, tiptoeing around the woman he no longer understood. He'd find me at my desk, not sketching, but analyzing spreadsheets, my face illuminated by the cool light of financial data. He'd try to engage, to reassert control with a comment about the market or a question about the grocery list. My answers were polite, brief, and utterly impenetrable. I was no longer his wife. I was a fortified citadel, and the drawbridge was permanently raised. The package from Ms. Chen arrived by courier. It was weighty, elegantly bound, the divorce papers. They were a masterpiece of legal precision, outlining the dissolution of our marriage with the cold clarity of a business contract. It detailed the division of assets, awarding me the house and a significant majority of our investments. And then, attached as Exhibit A, were the copies of the secret bank statements, each transaction for Chloe's benefit, highlighted in a soft, damning yellow. There was no screaming, no drama. I simply placed the package on the dark wood of his desk in his study, right in the center of his blotter. I positioned it neatly, parallel to the edges. Then I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. The familiar, comforting aroma filled the sunny yellow room one last time. I heard his key in the door, his weary sigh as he hung up his coat. His footsteps moved towards his study. Then, silence. A silence so profound and long I thought perhaps he'd had a heart attack. I poured 2 cups of coffee. Black, for both of us. I carried them into the study. He was still standing, frozen, the open package in his hands. His face was ashen. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a terror that was not about losing me, but about being caught. His carefully constructed world was in ruins at his feet. Anya, what? Where did you get this? He stammered, his voice a ragged whisper. It doesn't matter, I said, my voice calm. I set his coffee down on the desk beside the papers. What matters is that you have a choice. You can sign those papers, agree to the terms, and this can be over quickly and quietly. Or, I continued, my gaze unwavering, you can fight me, and I will enter every single one of these transactions into evidence. I will subpoena Chloe. I will show your partners at the firm how you commingled marital assets to fund your affair. The choice is yours. The threat hung in the air, clean and surgical. He wasn't facing a hysterical woman. He was facing a superior negotiator. He sank into his leather chair, the fight draining out of him. He was a man who understood leverage, and I had it all. He picked up the pen. His hand shook. He signed each page where the yellow tabs marked the spot. The scratch of the pen was the only sound in the room. When he was done, he looked broken. I never meant, he began, the useless apology dying on his lips. I know what you meant, David, I said, cutting him off. You meant that I was a liability. You were wrong. I was an undervalued asset. And you, I said, finally allowing a sliver of my cold fury to show, were a catastrophic investment. I gathered the signed papers. I left his coffee on the desk, untouched. He moved out within the week. He took his clothes, his golf clubs, and his shame. He didn't fight for the house, for the furniture, for the life we'd built. He just wanted to escape the devastating quiet of my victory. The divorce was finalized with stunning speed. My new income from Evelyn's project meant I easily qualified for the mortgage to buy out his share of the house. The court, presented with Ms. Chen's impeccable evidence, awarded me everything I asked for. I stood in the empty living room after he was gone. The silence was finally my own. I picked up the faded floral armchair he'd compared me to. I didn't keep it for sentiment. I had it reupholstered in a bold, modern fabric I loved, a deep emerald green. It was the first thing I did. I threw myself into my work. The tech startup project was a roaring success. My name began to circulate again in design circles. I was no longer David's wife. I was Anya, the brilliant comeback story. I heard snippets about him through the brittle grapevine of mutual acquaintances. He and Chloe had moved in together. It was not the glamorous affair he'd imagined. The reality of a day-to-day relationship, built on a foundation of deceit and financial strain, was reportedly fraught. The word was, he looked tired, older. A year later, I was hanging a new piece of art in the hallway, something abstract and vibrant, when the doorbell rang. It was a delivery man with a large flat package. Inside was a beautiful, expensive mirror, a housewarming gift from my first major client. The card simply read, "To the best investment we ever made." I hung the mirror in the entrance hall. As I adjusted it, I caught my reflection. I saw a woman, her eyes clear, her posture straight. She looked strong. She looked capable. She looked like herself. The door to the house was open, letting in the fresh air. Down the street, I saw a man walking a dog. For a split second, the set of the shoulders looked like David's. He turned. It wasn't him. I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no triumph. Just a quiet, steady peace. He had seen my sacrifice as a weakness, my dedication as dependency. He had called me a liability. But a liability is just a debt on a balance sheet, and I had collected, in full, with interest. I turned away from the mirror and walked back into my home, my life, my future. It was all mine, and it was finally, completely, enough.